And at some point, I made a kind of click and I realized that it wasn't about English itself, but it was about how safe I felt speaking in English.
An enormous welcome to the Power Talks. Firstly, thank you for being here. Thank you for pressing play. Thank you for giving me your time from my heart. It's really, really lovely to have you here. So this is my new podcast, my first podcast, and we are going to examine what it is that prevents women from being able to access and express their personal power, especially women who speak English as their second language or their third or their fourth, right? As that is absolutely, definitely an extra barrier. So I have some amazing guests in this series and I cannot wait to introduce you to them. My first guest is Miss Maria Llosent de Nardiz. So Maria is an amazing professional and an incredible individual. She has more than 21 years of experience in HR, specifically transforming environments by building the transformation vision in alignment with a company's strategy. She generates spaces based on trust, which is essential for innovation. And she makes the necessary incremental iterations that lead to the success of a project. This is underpinned by ensuring that the conditions are right for a growth mindset and also for the conversations that acknowledge a starting point, that acknowledge the reality. Having a real starting point is the basis for building the vision and the commitment of teams to change, she believes. So I had an amazing conversation with Maria. I knew that I would. I always enjoy talking to Maria. We align on many, many things. We talked about the importance, the essential element of connecting to your personal power, which is the base of all skillful communication. We talked about having a purpose, being a rebel, no good girl ever changed the world. We talked about how to stop listening to the voices in your head. We talked about how it's important to feel safe when you speak in a second language and also the acceptance of not being perfect. We also looked at what we can all do to create spaces that include quieter or marginalized people. So here we go, my first interview. So the first thing is just a massive thank you for coming here today to be with me and to give me your time and your
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, so welcome. It's a pleasure. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. I always enjoy our conversations. So I'm just going to ask you from the beginning. I'd like to know for you your experience of speaking English in professional environments and how doing that affects the way that you communicate.
That's a tough question. I would say that it has evolved through the time. When I started my career I started in a British company, and as I studied in a French school, I felt really unsafe speaking English. So I tended to compare English with French, and I could speak French without any effort, and I'm very good at French, I'm bilingual. So comparing it to English made me feel really insecure and really not understood or not well. I couldn't find the right words and express what I wanted. So basically I said what I was able to say with the words I knew in English. I've been studying English after that for ages because in all the companies I studied English. And at some point I made a kind of click and I realized that it wasn't about English itself, but it was about how safe I felt speaking in English. So at some point I decided that I could speak in English and I could express myself even if sometimes I couldn't find the perfect word or the right word I wanted. I could express myself and I decided to do so. So basically I would say the experience has changed. right now I feel safe speaking in English. Sometimes I cannot find the perfect word, but perfect is not the thing I need, and I feel fine. I feel safer.
I think that's such an interesting word, safe. That's so interesting that you said that, because yeah, that
It took
has
some
to,
time.
that, yeah, but it comes with like trusting yourself, no, like knowing yourself and being able to trust yourself, and I guess that's something that, I don't know, that's a journey from with age, is it? Like what was there a moment for you was there a specific moment when you made that transition from feeling unsafe or insecure to feeling safe, or was it a process? Do you know how that happened?
I would say that it happens when I stopped feeling I should say everything perfect
Yeah.
in English. When I accepted that I'm not bilingual in English, that isn't a problem, that English is a communication language, and accepting that I not being perfect was okay. And it took some time. I would say that it took some time because I'm very demanding with myself, and it wasn't obvious. At some point, I read a book that I liked a lot, which is about power, from Julie Diamond, and she said something about connecting with our personal power, no? And the things that makes us lose our power, no? And sometimes we are killing our power ourselves, and not embodying that I'm not English. That's who I am. I'm not English. I can speak 3 languages, not perfect, but I can manage in 3 languages. So that's enough, no? And accepting that that's enough made me understand that it was fine. And if I made mistakes or whatever, I could restart and re-explain, no? And I've understood that in English sometimes we convey the message better because we put attention on that, no? Sometimes when we are talking in our own language, things come out without putting the needed thinking, no? While in English we need to concentrate ourselves to convey our language, and we tend to validate much more if what we are saying is what the other one is perceiving. So at one time I accepted that I was not bilingual, and it was fine, and I decided to dare to be myself in another language and to explore who I was in another language as English, which I didn't feel comfortable in.
And then it's like how that is so it's because I think it is a journey as well, isn't it, with finding your voice. That can happen on a personal way, a personal level, and then also it gets compounded when you're adding another language. And I think those two things, they need to go together a little bit, right? Because it's also about, I'm interested in how people transmit authority and expertise, and how they have an influence, and how they how they have a real impact in a second language. Like could you talk a little bit about your experience?
The thing is, sometimes I would say that the first thing is you need to believe that you can convey a message. And we need to embody the message we are conveying, even if the words are not precisely the ones we will use in our language, or we cannot introduce as many nuances as we would like, no? And the other thing I find really interesting for me and helped me a lot was to feel comfortable speaking in English in different contexts, with different accents, with different people, and so on. So feeling that I had enough knowledge of the language to understand the to engage in a relationship in another language, no? Because sometimes we learn to speak and we are not able to understand many accents, so we are not exchanging, we are unilaterally saying things, but we cannot reply, no, let's say. So for me, going to many countries where the English was used, getting to know many different accents, reading, putting myself in difficult situations and making an effort in embodying the language, the culture, and everything was key.
Yeah, yeah. You at the beginning of that, you said something really important, is that you know, that you believe in what you're saying, basically. Like, you have a purpose. And I think when you believe that you can transmit anything, it's usually because you have there's a reason for you to be speaking, you know. Like, you're very, and I know you're a person that's very connected to your purpose in life, right?
For me, in the end, it's about, I understood that languages are to connect to people, as communication is. So I look the meeting points with the people to convey the language, no? And I think knowing a language is not enough. You need, or my experience is, I've needed to understand the context and what happens and the impact and the culture surrounding the language, no? And this is really helpful, because sometimes it's not only about translating what we are saying into another language, but telling that in the language. And telling that in the language is not about only the words, it's about the context. So we need to connect with the people where they can listen to us.
Do you feel that, so I think we've established, no, that there was for you a period where perhaps you didn't speak as much as you do now in professional situations, that you perhaps didn't put forward your opinions as much as you do now, I guess. Do you think that was connected mainly to English? Do you think that was in any way connected to your experience as a woman?
I would say that I've been kind of a rebel in my life, in the sense I was taught that women needed not to talk in many contexts, no? And to accept things. And this has made me precisely the opposite, and has pushed me not to stop saying things. So I would say, in the context that I didn't speak, it was much more linked to the language than to the fact of being a woman, because in being a woman hasn't stopped me. At some point, I had a message in my head all the time when I was listening to English, that I cannot understand, that completely disconnected me from what was happening around me. And what was really hard for me was to shut up in my head all the messages going against me, saying you cannot do that, and it's impossible, you don't speak English, you cannot understand, and so on and so on.
It's very distracting, that voice. And that voice is so distracting.
Yeah, it's horrible, because you are concentrated on not understanding, instead the other way around. And I married a person who's perfectly bilingual, and I said I couldn't speak English, and she said, you could speak perfect English. We are watching everything in English, films and everything, and then I wrote my thesis. I listened, I read and everything, and at some point I broke that barrier that was in my much more in my mind than real. But until I broke it, I couldn't connect, no, and it was disturbing.
I see that a lot, Maria, like that people have such a loud inner critic, or such a loud, you know, their inner voice is so loud that it just stands in their way of being able to communicate, to understand, to contribute, you know. And it's really about kind of training, okay, move your attention away from that noise, no? We all have it, but it's just
it's challenging,
like,
huh?
Yeah, it's very challenging. It's very challenging. Yeah, I mean that's our. I think that's kind of our work as humans, no, to move away from that constant
desire of making everything great, and not allowing ourselves to go through the path of learning and improving, no? Not being perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. The perfectionism, you know, it's a huge barrier for a lot of people. It just stops people from moving. And the only way we can learn, grow, acquire knowledge, acquire skills is by practicing, having a go at it, failing often. You know, it's all part of the journey, really. We have to be prepared to take imperfect action, no? For our listeners, I want to try and give them some like wisdom, no? Some kind of something that you perhaps learned throughout your professional career, something that you could share to give people encouragement, I suppose. So I don't know, I'm thinking maybe if there's been any sort of a specific situation where you could say, oh, this happened and it was a nightmare, but I learned this and now everything's okay. or just something just
related to English or in general?
Related to English, related to communication, actually. Like, sure, I mean, English, I'm my biggest, the thing that motivates me most is how do we communicate better, right? The English component for me is a detail, because that's my sort of professional career has been, the majority of my professional career has been working as with people, teaching them English. But what I'm actually really interested in is how do we communicate better, and how do we we're at a time, I mean, you know, this is something we've spoken about a little bit together before, actually. We're in a time of great complexity, and we need to be able to have difficult conversations in order for us to move forward and evolve, right? We have to be able to do that. And there's a lot of division, and there's a lot of there's sometimes conflict that we need to be able to learn to manage better. And so I'm interested in that, like, how do we communicate in a more conscious, collaborative, transformative way? So I think
you were saying before that if I had felt with the age the change in the English, probably in the English also, but the most significant change I've seen is in communication, because we learn to explain things differently and better, and we empathize much more with, or I will talk in I, because that's the way I've done it, but I'm fully aware that it's not the same for everyone, no? So I would say that in my life, the difficult experiences I've had have helped me to communicate better and to better understand the impact of the communication I had in people, no? And I would say, for example, we had to make a huge transformation in Mexico, in which we speak supposedly the same language, and sometimes when we think we speak the same language, we forget that there are things that are cultural things that go beyond the language that we are not taking into account, that it makes it impossible for our message or for my message to be conveyed to the person, no? So a great learning is to listen to what is not said, because sometimes we only listen to what is said, and to listen to what is not said, and to look and to create a context where we can convey the message we want. It's not only about English or about French or about any language.
Exactly.
It's about what surrounds the message to be able to communicate properly, no? And I was saying, when you speak in the same language, it looks like you communicate better, and it's not always the case, no? And so basically the learning through the time is, sometimes we need to go little by little to communicate something, because the person we are talking to is not ready to listen, or we are going too fast, or we are not understanding the context, or even sometimes we are starting in so different points that it is impossible we meet each other, because we are so far away, no? So we need to make a framework, a context where we can all go and connect there, no? In a sense. So I would say that's the most powerful and difficult thing to do, no? Because sometimes we are in a hurry, or we want quick results and everything, and not doing that properly has a huge impact in any project, in anything, because it breaks something, no?
Yeah.
So taking the time to build a communication that makes sense and is understood, and build the trust that I need to convey this message is key, no?
Yeah. And that's on, I think that's on like a micro level and a macro level. That's what needs to happen in kind of like small interactions that you have in your personal life, to what happens in, you know, whatever, business meetings, boardrooms, wherever.
And also consistency, in a sense, no? People need to realize who you are, and when it's in my experience, my personal experience is, as I'm consistent in the messages and in a sense predictable, people will identify if something that comes out from me or not, because they will identify. There is less room for mistakes there, because I tend to be consistent, and I tend to explain the context of something that I decide, no? Which is really powerful, because when you say, I'm putting the window there because I think the sun comes, people will understand. They will share or not share the reasons with you.
Sure.
But they will understand that you don't come up with something out of the blue without thinking about all the implications, no?
Yeah.
And that has been my bigger learning during my years, no? And sometimes asking for permission to try things, no? I know that this may sound weird for you, but I see that and I'd like to try. And when I've done that in a context, I would say 99.9 times I've been allowed to try. And if it wasn't the right answer, it wasn't the end, because I said I wanted to try that. Can I try it?
Yeah, as an experiment.
And this is
see
why.
what happens. Yeah, and this is yeah. You said another interesting word there, which is consistency, and that idea of consistency, I think, also comes from self-knowledge. Like if you are connected to yourself, where it is that you're going, what it is that you know what your purpose is, that generates an internal consistency, right? It means your actions are aligned with what's coming out of your mouth and what's happening in your kind of emotional, energetic field. Everything's aligned, and that allows you to be consistent and transmit consistency to people, and they can identify it, right? They feel it. And like that, for me, it comes back to sort of self-knowledge, having a purpose, knowing why you're doing something. And that's the root of good communication. You know, that's the root, because then it becomes honest, right? There's an honesty to it.
Exactly, and that's a point, because the other day I read an article from an American writer who has developed the both and thinking, and she was saying sometimes consistency is over valued, no? And for me it was quite astonishing, because for me consistency should be there. I've been working in compliance roles, I've been working in legal roles, I'm working right now in culture and transformation and HR roles, so related to people, and consistency for me should be there. But it made me think, because when I see things that are different from what I think, I try to understand what is behind, no? And she was telling that consistency sometimes imprisons us, and that does not allow us to evolve or to change or to rethink things, no? Because you need to be really consistent, let's say.
Yeah, because you're not flexible. It's
So
like there's a lack of adaptability. Maybe.
Exactly. So you're hiding yourself behind consistency, not to make the changes, no? So it introduced something that made me think, like, consistency is not about fighting, like if it was the end of the world every 10 minutes for everything, but including, in a sense, what is going on and how it affects the way you think. I mean, I used to go that way, and now that I've included that, I've changed a little bit, no? Or a lot, whatever, no? But so people understand consistency as an evolving thing, no? Not like rigidity, and I found it really enlightening, no?
Interesting. We'll put that. We'll add that link. I'll get the article from you, and we can add that link for listeners to read that article. Wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Because for me, like I'm just thinking about this now, but like consistency is about being connected to your truth. Actually, for me, consistency, and then once you've got that, you're then able to adapt and, you know, evolve or shift depending on the context and what's necessary in the moment.
Exactly, and that is not being untrue to yourself. It's just evolving with the context, no? And I've seen myself evolving, and I haven't thought I was losing consistency. But when I was young, I used to do things one way, and with the age, you understand the impact or the context, or you understand other things better, or you see the fear sometimes in the people surrounding you, and when you're young, it's like, how is he reacting or her reacting like that for such a thing? And now you can feel that he feels attacked, or so we will be consistent to our thing, but probably the message, if not well explained, we are losing consistency. That's why we need to include what goes and say we were going through that, and because something I'm taking something additional into account, I'm shifting that way, no, and I'm not killing who I am.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, interesting. Nice, very nice. All right, so I guess I might ask you one last question, which is just really what kind of oh no, I've got two questions. Oh, are you good for time?
Yeah, I'm fine.
All right. I've got two questions. So, in your industry, how do you feel that people who speak English as their second language, international, like in an international environment, how do you think they are treated? Do you think they are treated? Is it inclusive? Is there are allowances made for people who speak English as their second language? How are they treated?
It is difficult for me to make it a general answer, as I've changed from industries and from companies, and I've moved a lot, so I don't have a line that allows
lots
me
of different
to see. No?
Yeah.
So I've worked in British context, and in British contexts, non-English speakers, I felt that I lost a lot of power, that I was losing a lot of power there. The truth is, in this experience, I was younger, so my inner voice was louder. Yeah. Was it linked to my inner voice or to the context? I cannot make the difference, no? But I would say in the British context, I felt weaker or less safe, but probably because I wasn't in my full strength with English and with my professional perspective, no?
Yes.
I was working in non-English context, like in Swedish companies, and in that context we were all non-English speaker, which was easier, no? Because for all of us it was a loss of power. So in a sense, we were all feeling as a team, and we felt that we were making an effort, all of us, no? I also worked in a British and Indian context, which is not the same, and it was really challenging because they both felt that they were bilingual, but for us it was really difficult to mix both words and accents and tones and contexts and everything, and we were outsiders there, no? So I would say it will depend on the inclusiveness on the way the company is working on the inclusiveness of the people, no? And making it a safe space to speak in English. And this is a challenging thing, because even if we think we are working on that, sometimes we do not realize our reactions or the context or the effort people are making, and we are not always that inclusive. And this is a point we need to develop, not only for English but for many things. We are not being inclusive and listening for all the voices.
Yeah. There's a lot. There's still, I think things are improving, of course, but there's still a lot that we can do to create better environments for people to feel heard, actually, and to be valued, have their voices valued. Yeah.
And sometimes also it influences. There's another influence, because in English I remember there's a tempo of English, no? So people in English speak, stop, and speak. While in Spanish we over speak, no?
Right, okay.
And it has an impact because you can be perceived like invasive, for example, or in other cultures you need to wait, and sometimes if you wait too much, the time goes by and you are not listened to, no?
Yeah.
So it's not only about the language, but about the tempos of the languages.
Yes, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. There's so many components. What kind of advice would you give to people in the room who are the native speakers, and the more kind of dominant people in the room? Like, what advice would you give them to help them understand how to facilitate more inclusion?
I would say that the people, and I feel part of that dominant people because I occupy a lot of space, we need to give spaces, empty spaces, where people that are not used to lead or need some extra time to participate can enter. And sometimes we have so many things to say that we don't allow other people to enter that, and the conversation and everything. And it's been a tough learning for me because I occupied the space without realizing, no? And when you start realizing that you are occupying a space that no one else can occupy and we are not listening, it is a kind of wow. And for the people who do not do they do not go and take the space, it's not only the responsibility of the people who occupy it. You need to dare and to take it, because if not, it's not always easy to stop, no? So we need to take responsibility, all of us.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like that's a really nice place to end. I feel that's really nice. And I find it's, for me, that's an empowering message, no? Being able to take responsibility. It's a really empowering message because it shows us that we can have an influence. We can be co-creators of what we want to see in the world, right? I knew that we'd have a lovely conversation. Thank you so much for your time and your input.
You're more than welcome.
So what did you think? I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I also hope that if English is your second language, or your third or your fourth, I really hope that this inspired you to be more vocal in English. You know, the world really needs you. Thank you again for listening. I really appreciate having you here. I think these conversations deserve to have as much visibility as possible, and you can really help with that by liking and subscribing. This is that moment. Like and subscribe. Thank you so much, and I'm sending you all a big power-filled hug. I hope you can feel that.